Hello and welcome to Random Offense. I am Ethan Strauss. We will be joined by, in my opinion, the best sports media reporter that is Ryan Glasspiegel. He will deny it. I will not let him. I will not allow that kind of humility from him. He is at Front Office Sports. He will be joining us shortly. But I'm just telling all of you, we're doing a yearly thing right here. I hope it's yearly if we keep our commitment to it. The state of sports media. I believe that Ryan and I are uniquely qualified to expound on this because we so frequently talk about these meta issues. We are honest about some topics others shy away from. Sports gambling is one of them. I would say politics might be another one of them. So let's bring on Ryan. We might take a few questions. We might get dangerous, Ryan, but maybe we should start with how you're reporting on an interesting merger of sorts. You are talking about something that maybe brings media full circle, a joining of new media and old media that we might be able to analyze as a jumping off point as to where we are all headed in sports. I am referring to Barstool Sports, those boisterous Barstool Sports frat boys joining Big Noon on Fox to promote college football. Maybe you can expound and then we can start riffing.
This is going to be ancient news by the time this airs.
Oh, we're trying to trick people, Ryan. This isn't a pre-record. They're listening to it live. Wink, wink, wink. But
Okay,
continue.
so we are recording Thursday, July 17th at 2:06 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And yesterday, so now a week ago or whenever this airs, I reported that Fox Sports and Barstool were nearing an expansive deal in which Dave Portnoy would appear on their Big Noon Kickoff pregame show, and there would also be a Barstool show on FS1. And by the way, the Barstool and FS1 part was first reported by the anonymous Mike Francesa Chronicler Twitter account back after this. So I want to be fair with my attribution there. But this deal then got announced on Thursday, and it is very expansive. It's also going to include some digital stuff that's to be determined, and more Barstool people are going to be on Big Noon Kickoff. Dan Big Cat Cats is going to be on it sometimes. Some of their other people will be on it as time allows. And this is a big deal. I mean, this has been probably cooking for about a decade plus, where you started to see that the sports leagues and networks had a demographics problem.
Mm.
The sports players stayed the same age, but the audience was getting older. This is the opposite of the dazed and confused thing that I just clumsily
Mhm.
referenced. But basically, the leagues and networks have struggled to gain foothold with the under 35 crowd. And this is the way, and Pat McAfee on ESPN is the way that they're trying to co-opt that audience.
Yeah, you see them on campus. You see them literally on campus trying to channel some of that youthful energy. McAfee does a decent job of it at ESPN, having kids kick field goals for money. And Dave Portnoy, it was interesting how this was promoted to me, how he was really big on this argument of representing Michigan, being a Michigan man, making the argument that the reason he's there is that they haven't had Michigan representation on Big Noon, which does the most Big Ten coverage. And he's almost acting like an antagonist in this sort of, I don't know how to put it. Maybe they're not trying to be too partisan team wise there, but he's bringing this argument of, I'm here to represent Michigan. Michigan is here. I'm going to be an antagonist and a troll to you, Ohio State fans. It doesn't seem like classic network sports television. It feels like something different.
Well, and it also wasn't totally true because Charles Woodson, who was a legendary Michigan player, is on that show. He's not on it regularly, but he's on it before the Michigan Ohio State game and before a couple other big Michigan games every year. So to act like they've had zero representation is not totally accurate. But yes, to your point, he is going to be on there as a partisan. And this was something that also kind of got innovated on the internet by Bill Simmons probably 20 plus years ago when he was honest about his fervent Boston fandom in a way that sports writers never were. And so he gained this big recognition based on his voice and his ability to cover things that, people were interested in, but the stodgy newspapers would not, like, Real World and Road Rules and lots of things like that. But yeah, Portnoy is going to be on there as a partisan, and he's going to be mixing it up with Urban Meyer in a way that I think, like, I said this on our Front Office Sports Today show. The best thing possible for the audience is if those two actually don't like each other and are at
Mm.
each other's throats. I think that would be fascinating.
I think that would be a lot of fun. Now, let's take it to the topic du jour for us, which is the state of sports media. I don't see anybody expecting this to fall apart. I don't see anybody saying, no, this cannot be digested by Fox. And we remember in 2017, I believe it was, ESPN tried to merge forces with Barstool, do the Van Talk podcast, not even with Portnoy, but with PFT and Big Cat, who weren't as controversial. And it all exploded in that particular ecosystem at that particular time. So is the faith in Barstool merging with a network, does that have to do with Fox having a different political valence? Or is that about the changing times that right now it's not so controversial to be a Barstool bro? And that's part of the mainstream as much as anything else is.
Yeah, it's definitely all of the above. I mean, could you have imagined that ESPN's relationship with McAfee would last this long as he was, publicly calling out Norby Williamson, who was practically furniture at that network in his role as an executive behind the scenes and everything else that he's done? But they're like, no, we're sticking with him. We know what we got in business with. And Fox, to your point, has always been a maverick company. They started with, like, I don't know if people like remember in the 90s, early 90s, how controversial like The Simpsons were. I'm sure you had friends who weren't like allowed to
Yeah.
watch it by their parents. Now they are this, squeaky clean brand, but really from the advent of Fox, they have gone against the grain and un-PC and whatever. And so I think that as a company, they are probably better position to handle it. And, Portnoy has gone on Fox News and Fox Business Network for years now. So this has been somebody that their company has been comfortable distributing to wide audiences for a long time.
I agree. I do think, as a hypothetical, if something like this had been tried in 2017, Fox, even if they are the company of Fox News, would have been bullied out of doing it. I think there would have been too many controversial comments. It would have gotten a circulation on that version of Twitter that felt like a storm, that felt like something they had to do something about, versus now, where, yes, they're a company unlike ESPN. They don't have as many people within the fold who might be ideologically opposed to Portnoy or think they're ideologically opposed to Portnoy. But it's about the social media environment that's different, that nobody really cares. That the comments he might have said about women that were such a big deal in 2017 that seemed to cause a walkout, metaphorically, if not literally, at ESPN, it just doesn't matter to anybody anymore. The vibe has shifted, as people often say.
Yes, that is definitely true. No, I think Fox, if it was something that Rupert Murdoch wanted and was steadfast about, then they would have just told everybody who complained about it to jump in a frozen river. And
Mm.
you would think that this is something that this deal is on the scope that you would think that the Murdochs are involved in it. If whether they're the driving forces or not, I don't know, but yeah, there has been a vibe shift because I don't think that they would get bullied off of ESPN right now if they did a deal with ESPN. And they were
Mm.
bullied off
Agreed.
ESPN in 2017. And again, that was less controversial characters. That was a show on in the middle of the night on ESPN2. They had network legends like Chris Berman behind it, and that wasn't enough to save it.
It wasn't. It was such a different time. And I want to look at this particular time. I want to look at what is the politics of sports media. That's a big question because, yes, we say vibe shift. Something has shifted. I point to how back in the day, baseball felt compelled to move the All-Star game out of Atlanta because of backlash in progressive circles. And I don't even want to say progressive circles because it was like progressive circles were the mainstream at that point. There was the height of cultural power for the Democratic Party at that point after January 6th. It was 2021. But today it is different. Obviously, Elon Musk runs Twitter. That place is different. It causes a different conversation. I don't have a sense completely. It's not like it's gone all the way the other way. And all of a sudden, these journalists who are very much openly progressive at all these different companies who are on TV for ESPN, it's not like they've shifted and now they're MAGA people. Is it just a lot of people are being secret about their politics? Has the loudest element retreated to blue sky? What do you think? What do you think the average, if we do a survey, I'm just rambling without asking you a question. If we do a survey of people working in sports media, what's the vote breakdown, do you think?
Um, I don't think that that has shifted. I think that sports media by and large were Joe Biden voters, but I think that the audience has been revealed to be more
That's the
conservative
thing.
leaning than was generally believed by the networks at the time. And I think that there has been, to use your word, a preference cascade where networks started to realize, oh wow, like our core audience really doesn't like what they're being served, and we are going to pivot to try and, give them a menu of things that they like better. And I think, yeah, the turning point was for sure when Elon Musk bought Twitter, and it just changed what was amplified on that platform versus what might have gotten buried. And we've had conversations about that before. I think, though, we ran an A B test as a country during COVID where
Mm,
red states were open and blue states were closed. And we didn't see any type of increased mortality in red states versus the places that shut down restaurants and bars and schools
mm,
for years.
yeah.
And so I think that that was like a big shift in terms of like this blue red wave or whatever. And I don't think I said that as eloquently as I could, but I
No,
think that
I
it was
let
on
me.
a parallel track with
y-
Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, this is okay. So this is a topic that is not necessarily sports, but it's something that I think about. I think where people are moving can tell the tale of where the culture is moving. I remember when I was a bit younger, I was more in my 20s, and it was like everybody was moving to a city. The cities, they had problems, they were expensive, but they were thriving. Everybody was extolling the virtues of farmers markets. Whole Foods was a marker of political change. If your city got a Whole Foods, you were trending blue. Things were going blue. The red areas were more the areas of small towns that were increasingly desiccated. And it told the tale of shifts in a blue direction in the Obama era. Well, what's happened recently? Like you said, it's people moving to red states away from blue states. And then the culture, it trends a little bit red. I didn't expect us to talk about that, but I do think that's been a feature in what's happened. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's less about the shift among sports journalists, their political preferences. It's more about how recently they felt they were on the vanguard of where everybody was going. And that their job was to lead people there as this enlightened person with a lantern leading us down the path. And in the end, it felt a little bit like that Jerry Maguire scene where he gets fired and he yells, "Who's coming with me?" Like he expects people to come with him. And it's only Renee Zellweger following him to metaphorical blue sky or whatever, and nobody else. And that's kind of what's happened, it feels like. It feels like they were loud in part because they thought history was going a certain direction, and then history surprised them, and so now they're quieter.
Yeah, I can buy that. And so Jason Whitlock made a point on Thursday where he said July 16th, 2025 was the day woke sports died. It was the same day that Shane
I
Gillis
was
gave
gonna say Shane Gillis killed like that. That's the
well, it
day. I
was
mean,
like my report on Portnoy and Barstool doing a big deal with Fox, and Shane Gillis doing that SB monologue where he was telling like objectively funny jokes, and the like elite sports audience was just like he was bombing with that audience in the room, but killing on Twitter. And I
yeah.
think that's an analogy for what we've just been talking about where like the Simone Bileses of the world don't think these jokes are funny, but Joe Public is laughing a lot on social media about them.
Yeah, to me, perhaps it wasn't the funniest joke, but it was the joke that announced the shift. Was him just taking a little shot at Megan Rapinoe and saying she's not here, nice. And then when the crowd responded with groans, said, "Oh, we're gonna lie like she's a good time. We're gonna do that." So I felt that was just something. If this happened, somebody texted me this. I'll even say who it was. I will out him. Maybe I shouldn't. But people like that kind of thing where you reveal an indiscretion. John Middlecoff texted me
Oh,
after that and said, if that happened in 2022, what happens at ESPN? If Shane Gillis gives that performance hosting the ESPYs, taking those shots, making those jokes, what happens? Walkouts, demands for an apology. That's probably true. That's probably true. That's not a long time ago. But now, nothing as far as I can see. Everybody, if they have a problem with it, just takes it.
yeah, I mean Sarah Spain took a bunch of shots at that and that would have been consistent with how she would have reacted then. Um but this is like Burke Magnus's ESPN. I mean, he got the power 2 or 3 years ago, and he was the driving force behind Barstool Van Talk in 2017. He was the one who made that happen, and it got we already talked about what happened, but now he is really firmly in charge of the network's content. We've got Pat McAfee, who is not been removed despite what we've talked about before. We've got Shane Gillis hosting the ESPYs. This is an ESPN that is trying to move in real time with everything that we're talking about.
When will the critics move in real time? When will they moderate? That's what I want to know. We get accused of, I don't even know, some sort of cartoonishly right wing slant where we don't feel like we're that. We don't feel like that kind of person. We try to be pretty neutral and try to call balls and strikes, but there just aren't a lot of other people calling balls and strikes. We've got Outkick the Coverage, which is fairly explicitly aligned with MAGA, and that's their prerogative, but they're aligned in that way. And then it seems like anybody else who's got a neutral branding is not so neutral. If I'm reading awful announcing, it's going to sound almost like Deadspin of the modern day. Where are the arbiters, Ryan, in sports media?
I don't know, but I do want to return to Gillis because it was
Yeah.
interesting. The stuff that spread was the unwoke stuff, but he also spent like 3 minutes on a prolonged story making fun of Trump, like talking him about how he introduced like his daughter to the president of soccer, which was like the head of FIFA, and how it was like just like this really like awkward and kind of sad interaction. And so that like Gillis was calling balls and strikes. He was taking shots at all sides of the aisle, but the stuff that caught everybody's eye was the unwoke. And
Yeah, I just want to interject there because I mentioned something like this on Mark Halperin's show. For whatever reason, right now, it seems as though that can happen outside of the left. You can have differences of opinion, you can argue about it, you can hash it out. But on the other side, within the left, it's just you're all the way with me or you're all the way out. So calling balls and strikes is conservative coded currently. It wasn't the case when I was a kid. It does seem to be the case now, where if you criticize both sides, you are right coded. You are not left coded for the most part.
yeah, I mean that's a good point. I hadn't really thought of it that way. It like because it is funny because the left thinks of itself as being the tolerant side, but they're intolerant of any other type of viewpoint. And when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah, it's just frustrating to me. I would like a healthier culture where we can just hash it out and have conversations. I don't quite see that happening. I don't know if Gillis marks the day woke sports died along with Barstool. I'm not sure. That might be reading too much into the moment, but something is happening.
I would
Something is
say that
happening.
the vibe shift, those two things happening together on the same day. I will not say woke sports is dead. It's not
Mm,
dead.
no.
But um life support?
I don't know. I mean, would dead be flipping the other way and people being worried about getting canceled for expressing a political affinity that's not the right? Would that be a total flip? I gotta say, I kind of like where it is right now. I mean, can I say that? If we're doing a state of sports media, I think right now, where a majority of sports journalists are progressive, but there is a contingent who aren't and there aren't mass cancellations like there were in the recent past that we're going to pretend weren't a big deal, but everybody was terrified by. Everybody was so scared of saying the wrong thing, having it misinterpreted, and getting run out and having their public reputation destroyed. It's not like that right now. I think it's in a pretty good place. I think sports are in a pretty good cultural place. I'll say that. What say you?
Yeah, I would agree. And you know, you see it at like the MLB All-Star game to bring it back to Atlanta. So there was like a journalist who asked a very like long-winded question, and I didn't even like know what the setting was. So when I saw this video for the first time, I just saw this journalist asking this long question, and I didn't know that the person who was going to be answering it was Pat McAfee.
I love those.
Like, so like I saw it and I'm like, oh God, what is he gonna say? And I actually thought he handled it great.
Oh,
Like
beautifully.
awful announcing like accused him and Dodgers manager Dave Roberts of being company men. But actually this brings us to a good point because when the MLB canceled the All-Star, moved it from Atlanta, Dave Roberts came out, oh yes, great move. Like we cannot have, I don't know what he said about the
Yeah,
voting
he
laws,
was
but
in support of it.
he was in support of the
Yeah.
decision and in support of the backlash to the voter law. I don't even know what the voter laws are. So, uh,
Any state laws like that. I still am not sure exactly what the 2017 bathroom bill law in North Carolina actually did that compelled the NBA to move their All-Star game. The state laws are cavernous, but I will say turnout went up in Georgia in 2022 and it went up in 2024. And as I've written, the hyperbole on how this was Jim Crow or Jim Crow on steroids or Jim Eagle, as Joe Biden also said, I'm just going to call BS on that. That obviously wasn't the case. This was completely crazy how institutions reacted to it. But you were saying,
but you got that answer in 2021 or whatever. And then now you have Dave Roberts saying, "Oh, we're thrilled to be in Atlanta. I can't speak to this controversy." And so I think that that was another thing that was like illustrative of the vibe shift. And like I loved McAfee being like, "Well, none of us are political lobbyists. At least I don't think."
well, okay, would the vibe shift dying be that sort of neutrality from McAfee, from Roberts? Or would it be somebody going, that's ridiculous, you're insane. What are you doing? Why are you describing it that way? How biased? Look at this
Well,
biased journalist.
McAfee doesn't know what the law is, but I
I
think
know.
he must have been briefed that somebody
Yeah.
might ask this because he seemed very prepared.
He did a very good job. I thought he was a droid. I didn't think it was fair of Awful Announcing to denigrate him in that way. What do you expect in that situation? But I will say in a way, I appreciated the crazy journalist question because it is an obvious hypocrisy. It really should have been directed more at Commissioner Manfred as opposed to Dave Roberts. But it's wait a second. This law was so bad that it compelled you to move the All Star game from Atlanta. You said that voting rights are important and this was taking voting rights away. Literally nothing has changed. The law is the same law. So what the hell, man? What
Thank you for
happened
your
here?
question. The vibe has shifted. Next question.
Yeah, yeah, the vibe has shifted. Look, I'll be honest. I have no beliefs. I have no core morality. I do everything on the basis of expediency, and that was easy back then, and this is easy right now.
We want
Next
everybody to
question.
see this Atlanta stadium where you have all this real estate around it for residential and an entertainment district. So these teams don't have to rely on the lowering pool of local TV revenue. We want everybody to see this. This is the model.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, one of the reasons why I'd wish there was more of a capacious debate within the left, within prestige media, is because this is actually a legitimate question. I know that they were largely in support of it because the corporations punishing a municipality were doing it in the direction of politics they prefer. But I believe that's an open question as to, is that okay? Is that democracy? Is that what we want for corporations to band together and when they don't like a law, punish the voters for passing that law? I'm sure we could come up with a scenario where we would say, we appreciate the corporation did that. But when that was happening with increasing frequency, when Twitter could just amass this kind of instant consensus, I remember looking at it and going, I don't know how I feel about it. I didn't necessarily have an opinion on the 2017 bathroom bill in North Carolina, but I felt a certain way about these outside corporations. I think the NCAA got in on it, some other corporations going, we are punishing you because we don't like the laws you made for yourself. I think that's territory that's worthy of a discussion as to whether or not we would want the country run that way. And the thing that killed that, Ryan, was actually DeSantis going to Disney. I don't think we've seen anything like that ever since.
Yeah, where he just like really threatened to like put them through the ringer over their backlash of one of his bills. This is another thing like where, I'm not Mr. Politics. I don't remember the exact specifics, but I do remember that they didn't like one of his bills and he basically threatened to cost them a lot of money and then they like stood
Yeah.
down.
Well, and then there was a lot of coverage in prestige media on how what DeSantis was doing was outside the boundaries, which is fair. The idea that you're canceling contracts or using your laws to punish a company in the specific is, let's say, a debatable action that people could criticize, but they weren't really looking at it from the other perspective, which is imagine if these corporations were banding together to punish New York City for doing something progressive. How would you feel about that? How would you react to that? Would you say that's free speech? Would you say that's fair? I think there are a bunch of conversations, and we could connect it a little bit.
Well, we're going to see that probably starting next year. So we're going to get to see your hypothetical borne out.
Maybe. I just think it's similar to how during the pandemic, civil liberties weren't getting discussed. There wasn't a robust conversation about what rights Kyrie Irving had as a Brooklyn Net back then. Should he be allowed to play in games if fans can be in the arena? It was just, you're not supposed to think about anything. You're just supposed to repeat whatever the people in your business are repeating. And I don't know if we're totally out of that moment, but something has shifted, which is the theme of this particular show, I suppose.
Yeah, it really, I mean, what it is when the public reelected Donald Trump, and it was like, it was so unfathomable on January 6th, 2021
Yeah.
that this could have happened. But I will I'll pat myself on the back. Like I started noticing probably like mid 2022, like, wow, there's way more like Trump flags and people wearing Trump shirts, MAGA hats in Chicago than at any point. Like let alone after January 6th, but like there was never any time where people would proudly endorse him in this city. And I started to notice it and I was like, maybe he's not dead.
Those were just the people who beat up Jussie Smollett, who you were noticing in Chicago, rocking the MAGA gear. But yeah, I let's take it from the politics to the business.
That was how I knew he was lying because I was like, nobody in Chicago wears mega hats.
Back
Does
then,
not
he could
sound
have
right.
It could have been
Then I
plausible.
started to see it 4 years later, or whatever later.
Yeah, it could have been plausible later. Show off the slogan on your shirt because that's our next topic.
OS, sports is big business.
Sports is big business. Now we do the State of the Union on that particular topic. I was sent some study by a subscriber of mine at House of Strauss, a study saying that there are just as many jobs in sports media today as a decade ago, which seems inconceivable, Ryan. I don't even know how that can be possible because I remember a somewhat robust print media, let's just say digital media, let's just say writing media industry, one that would fly me around to Warriors games and make money doing that. I don't see anything like that. But the argument was that, look, there are all these podcasts out there, people on YouTube like we are right now doing this sort of job. The olden jobs have been replaced by the new jobs. It seems like decline. It is not decline. And yet, Ryan, I feel like your shirt's not as true as it once was, and I feel like it's decline. What do you say?
Well, is this the sports business or the sports media business?
Okay, I see what you're
Different
saying.
question.
Let's say sports media because there is quite a bit of money being made off of sports themselves. So let's say sports media
Yes,
is what
it's
I'm intending.
sports media. Well, it's big business for Barstool. It's big business for Pat McAfee. It's big business for The Ringer. But yeah, it doesn't seem like there's are as many jobs in sports media as there were a decade ago because there was this flood of VC money that went into the internet and tried to make traditional media copy the blogs. You look at like USA Today buying the big lead and
Hmm.
NBC partnering with Pro Football Talk and like ESPN launching Grantland. And it sure seems like there was a lot more money swashing around for entry level and mid level jobs than there are is today. Now it's a great time to be the king because I don't think that there was anybody a decade ago who was going to get the type of deals that McAfee and Portnoy have gotten for themselves from traditional media. And it almost feels like it's flipped where the internet companies have almost superseded TV. You could go beyond sports with like Alex Cooper and Joe Rogan. They like you used to want to be like Matt Lauer or Bill
Yeah.
O'Reilly or something, and now I think that these internet stars are at least have higher financial upside. But I would not buy the hypothesis that there are more jobs in sports media today than there were a decade ago.
I'm gonna force Ray Marcano to ask a question on the screen. If he's gonna be in the chat, giving his takes, asking his questions, Ray, I cannot possibly track the text while speaking here. There he is. There's Ray, a sports editor in our midst. He's got takes on the industry. I feel like he wants to say a little something. Ray, what do you got for us?
I, well, actually, I was just kind of chatting back and forth in the chat, but I will ask a question about the state of the sports media.
Sure.
Uh, do you believe that the state of the sports media today is better off from a journalistic standpoint or worse off from a journalistic standpoint, since so many people who are producing content don't have any formal training?
I'm gonna say it's hard to answer that question without a time frame, right? But my general sense is worse. It is. Just because I don't know if I was as statistically savvy as perhaps I should have been, and maybe my other colleagues could say the same. But to actually be on the ground in locker rooms, talking to players day to day is different. It's so different from watching on TV. And I know that a lot of people at Deadspin beat back against a bunch of sanctimonious print journalists defending their expertise on the basis of being on the ground because they said that access corrupts. But I think access informs more than it corrupts. And it certainly informs better about what these guys are like and what's interesting about them. What I thought was a really good example was the 2020 NBA playoff bubble. Now, what people take from that is that interest collapsed due to politics. I do think that was a component in addition to the pandemic. But it was such a tremendous collapse that there had to be multiple factors. And one of them, in my opinion, was this: no journalists, no media, nobody in locker rooms, nobody talking to these guys and getting stories about what's happening. As human beings, we are story absorbing creatures. We understand everything through story. And if there's nobody there on the ground to talk to these guys and to get stories, the guys, they're not really savvy about what's interesting about themselves. I think that's why it's worse. We're more information poor, even if we've got so many voices on YouTube looking at everything. We just know less, which is paradoxical because we have the technology to be in constant communication. I think it's worse. Maybe Ryan
I
disagrees.
think it's also that the players' salaries have just skyrocketed so much, and I've said this on the show before, that they're just plutocrats,
Mm.
and they're like, Josh Giddey, who is like a nice player, is holding out for the difference between 20 and 30 million dollars a year. This is not somebody who's going to be like a difference maker for the Bulls contending for a championship. Like I don't know, is he like the best player on their team? Whether he was or wasn't, like, they're a mediocre team, and this guy is like pounding his fists on the table for $30 million. The Devin Booker is going to make over $70 million this summer. I mean, this season. It's the players have just become on a cast of Fortune 500 CEOs, maybe even greater in terms of their prestige in society, and they just have zero interest in saying anything interesting to some like nerdy little dude who couldn't play their sport.
So this was a Nate Jones point. The Move Insoles entrepreneur slash NBA agent Nate Jones made this point after I was talking about the salaries in the NBA, that the money has gotten so big for these guys that they've got no pressure on themselves to promote the game or to do commercials or any of this extra stuff. They've got so much money. If you're getting $287 million, as is happening to some of these guys in their early 20s, do you have a lot of pressure on you to try to market a shoe? It used to be that marketing a shoe would be a lot of money compared to your NBA salary. Now it isn't. And so I think there's just less onus on them, less pressure on them to communicate with the public and to give stories with the public. There's just more of a mercenary feel to the whole affair, in part because of that. And to what you're saying, Ryan, I feel like the dam is breaking on some of that. I feel the fan frustration when I do listen to local sports radio. Just today, I was listening, and a middle aged man with a thick Indian accent was just yelling at Jonathan Kuminga and telling him to wake up. You're not that good. Guess what happens in the real world? And it just felt like there's a little something different out there that I don't know. I think fans are getting frustrated with the current state of affairs.
This you just described a call that has been happening my entire life on WFAN and WEEI. So maybe
Same middle-aged Indian man.
not Indian, but like just random blue collar worker calling these guys bums. That has been
What the
happening.
heck is happening with Josh Giddey? He thinks he's Michael Jordan.
But you talk about pressure to promote the game. I don't even think they feel like they're under pressure to win. And like it doesn't seem to be that important to them whether they win or lose. Like there was that video when the Thunder won the title that showed like all the other team sports, like how much they celebrated, and it looked like the Thunder won some like November game in Memphis that night. And so like it did not seem to dawn on them that what they accomplished was supposed to be the pinnacle of their lives.
It did not. I don't know what to attribute that to. The Oklahoma City Thunder have their own specific culture, and this might be more specific to the NBA than the other sports. The other sports, I think, still have traditional celebrations, but there's something in particular. The NBA, I think, is changing faster than the other sports. That's what I will say in our state of sports and sports media. The NBA is changing quicker. One of the reasons for why is because the new salary structure. There is more money in the NBA than ever before, but they instituted a hard cap that's not technically called a hard cap, but it is, in intents and purposes, a hard cap. And so it's created a dynamic where, as you say, they're getting paid like oil sheiks, some of them, Shake Gilgeous-Alexander or whatnot, but then there's no more middle class of players, and there are only a couple guys on the team who are going to get
Middle
those
class
big
is like a
dollars.
$20 million a year.
You're going to see fewer guys even getting, I think, that sort of number. I think the way it's going to be priced, the bean counters are going to say you need your Gilgeous-Alexander, you need your Jalen Williams. I don't know if we can even have a Chet Holmgren. And if we do have a Chet Holmgren, everybody else, they got to be making minimum dollars. I think that's the future that you're seeing in the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, whatever it I is it going to make them care more about winning and losing? Because it doesn't seem like, when you watch sports, you want to see something that feels like a meaningful athletic competition with stakes. And when it doesn't feel like that, you're like, okay, well, then why am I spending my time on this?
Well, this is a good segue because I do think the better NBA podcasts, for whatever reason, are with players, NBA players, who did not care about the right things. I think people love Gilbert Arenas talking to his band of malcontents who appear to have mostly played the game for their own selfish pursuits and didn't necessarily win championships or have great team accomplishments to speak on. But yet fans find that relatable, Ryan. So square that circle for me, and maybe we can bring it. If you can't answer that question, what do you make of the athlete podcast era? Is this what is replacing the journalist? Is this what people want more than they want the sports journalist?
Well, if you look at what happened at FS1, I would argue the opposite because
Oh,
they just wiped out all of those athletes. Like, hey, like Emmanuel Acho, LaShawn McCoy, Chase Daniel, James Jones, Michael Irvin, Paul Pierce, Keyshawn Johnson, maybe. Get out. We're replacing you with Barstool.
yeah.
And so I think that and McAfee is an athlete, but you almost he almost seems like more of like a natural podcaster.
Well, he's a punter, which gives him a kind of liminal status within the NFL. But you were saying,
So I almost see it like, at least with TV, I like FS1. To me it looks like the public isn't connecting with these athletes, so let's replace them with relatable men.
well,
And
I think they've got a time problem. Here's what I would say. Somebody said to me, somebody said, at what point, speaking to me, at what point do you just not talk about the Warriors because people are sick of that and don't want to hear about it? Obviously, I didn't play for the Warriors, but this was the team I covered. And I said, I don't know if we're ever going to arrive at that point, for myself at least, because this was one of the last teams of the monoculture before everything got splintered. And interest in such a thing might be inexhaustible, at least until the people who are around for it are dead. It would appear that Julian Edelman's podcast is very popular, and all he talks about is war stories from those Belichick Patriots. And all I want is war stories from those Belichick Patriots. I don't necessarily care about Julian Edelman telling me his top 10 quarterbacks this season. And I think that's where a lot of the public is with the Athlete Podcast. Please, Gilbert Arenas, tell me some crazy story from the Wizards back in the day, right? Tell me some crazy story about what guys did in the nightclubs back then. Tell me about it. Give me
remember
your.
his blog, by the way? That was like totally revolutionary. When the bloggers loved Gilbert Arenas's blog.
Well,
And it was like very sad when he had the weapons incident in the locker room, because he was somebody who was totally beloved by like the Deadspins of the world.
he was ahead of the curve, and he appears to be today. He's doing the live streams, he's doing the playback, but that's him being current, and maybe he can be current that way. But I just think there's more of an interest in the athletes' war stories, is what I'm noticing, than their perspective on what's happening today. But these companies, your Fox Sportses, your ESPNs, they hire them to talk about what happened last night. And because perhaps they are wary of offending the guys who played in the game, I don't think we're getting the good stuff. And that's where the
Well,
disconnect is.
you're hiring them to talk about what happened in the games last night while they were out getting drinks and not watching them.
Well, I think that's the problem in some ways. You do hear about those people who don't watch any of the games and speak about them on ESPN, but I don't think that's the primary problem. I think the primary problem, they don't want backlash from their brotherhood. They don't want that. There's a statute of limitations. They can tell a crazy story from 15 years ago. They don't want to say something bad about a guy and be objective, whereas perhaps there's not expertise coming from Dave Portnoy, but he's going to light a guy up and call him a loser, call him a bum, and people respond to that kind of thing. And I think that's why perhaps you're seeing the Barstool people start to take market share from the athletes.
Yeah, but I mean, we haven't seen that tide shift to your point with the podcast yet. It seems like by and large, there's a few big winners like the Simmonses and the Barstools of the world, but most of these big podcast deals are going to the athletes.
They are, but Simmons' ability to stand the test of time, I also think speaks to what I'm saying, which is the ability to call a guy a bum. Maybe not a bum, but just to say
Yeah,
this
not
guy's
necessarily, but like to,
he's
an
overpaid.
honest light on underperformance.
Yeah, he's overpaid. He's stealing money. You do that in athlete culture, you're pocket watching, right? You're not supposed to do that. That's a violation. I think the ability of Simmons to have an annual bad contract summit with my guy Big Waz and Joe House, I think that is one of the reasons why that's still something people go to. They don't need you to be the authority. They don't need you to know everything, but they want authenticity. And I do think the athletes have an authenticity problem, at least in terms of what just happened.
Yeah, and I mean, for whatever reason, they're for the most part not interesting, and it might be to your point that they're laying up on criticism. Although we don't see Shaq and Barkley do that. Shaq's podcast, he will take some real shots.
He threatened to punch Robert Griffin in the face or beat him
Yeah,
up.
and it was like Griffin is now turning into it's almost like a new age Skip where everything he says, it's like you look at it in a vacuum and it seems kind of innocuous because the Angel Reese tweet that got everybody mad, he was actually being like relatively level-headed and saying, hey, I can see this part, I can see that part. But because he amplified, like he basically he amplified a racist meme and said this is bad, and everyone got mad at him for sharing the meme. And it was the most like weird thing in the world. I'm like, I don't understand how this guy is getting under everybody's skin. Like, this is a big world out there. You can mute people.
Yeah, I think part of it, I don't think the backlash he's getting is deserved. I think on occasion he has said something reasonable, and there's an avalanche directed at him for reasons that don't have to do with him and might be unfair. But he's also, and I hate sharing this because I've never met the guy. I cringe in sharing this. But people tell me who've worked with him, he is not fun to work with. He is not somebody who engenders a lot of respect and fealty and warm feelings towards. I think that goes back to when he was playing, in addition to the studio stuff. And I wonder if there's an undercurrent there because of that, and fewer people willing to stand up for him. What?
What does it have to do with Shaq?
I don't know. Shaq might talk to somebody who knows him and hear he's a bad. I feel so unfair because people take shots at me and I'm just passing on. But this is just what I've heard. I'm trying to answer your question. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, but like the people whose skin he's getting under, it's not like I'm not just talking about people who like worked on ESPN NFL. Although Ryan Clark, who did work with him both at ESPN
That was
and
crazy.
In the NFL, just he really gets under Ryan Clark's skin.
Yeah.
To put it lightly.
Right? What was the accusation? It was something about how he fetishizes his own wife because she's white, and that's what he feels badly for. Is the stuff from Ryan Clark was insane.
I know. Like the day that whatever Ryan Clark's last day is at ESPN, whether that's in a few weeks or in a few years, that's gonna go on his like gravestone. The RG3 feud stuff because to take it back like full circle to what we were like discussing earlier, the people who run ESPN right now really do not want their talents doing that stuff. And you talked about people like who could get canceled for being left.
Hmm.
This is like a case where I don't know if it's if it ever happened, if there's ever his final day, you'll look back on that moment and be like, okay, that was when he started walking around with like a grenade.
Yeah, it was interesting hearing an interview with Sam Ponder, and I got to give Ponder credit. She was doing an interview with Sage Steele and addressing some of the comments she made against Leah Thomas, I believe that it was,
It
or
is Amani
she,
Clef,
it was
the
what in the what
boxer.
now? Oh yeah, yeah,
Amani
yeah, yeah,
Clef,
yeah,
the
yeah.
boxer. It's both of
And
them, I think, actually.
because a lot of people connected the dots and believe that she got fired because of that sort of conservative coded activism that, at least on that issue, is more in alignment with the nation by some poll results 80%. And I think she could have leaned into that, but she also mentioned that she didn't know that that was why, and that she was making a lot of money to work 1 day a week. And some of the things that I heard explaining the ouster of Sam Ponder, but you sometimes don't know why somebody gets
There's a
axed.
video on YouTube of a lot of views of us discussing Sam Ponder.
There is a crazy amount of views, Ryan. Remember that, Trace. Remember, for whatever reason, the algorithm loves Sam Ponder, ESPN, trans sports. We don't know why, but we talked about it and it got millions of views when we talked about it. We have no idea why, dear Lord algorithm, why that's the case, but maybe we can reverse engineer it and make it happen again in this particular conversation. Who knows? But yeah, she was saying that she wasn't saying that she's a victim in that way. She is saying that she's self-censored, though, to speak to the vibe shift. She is saying that they were doing Some Woman You're Inspired By for Women's History Month, and that she wanted it to be Riley Gaines, the activist speaking out against Leah Thomas, but she went with her mom instead of Riley Gaines. And you just rolled your eyes a little bit because you're a little bit anti-Riley Gaines. That was the poker tell that I'm reading right there. But yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting to see, and I credit Sam Ponder for not saying I'm a victim and not connecting dots other people had connected and saying that's why it happened and saying it's a little more complicated.
I just wish that one time Riley Gaines would talk about fairness in women's sports. That was
Ah,
fairness.
oh my God, Ryan, you're gonna get us canceled from the right after the vibe shift,
Uh,
criticizing Riley Gaines. We have different issues with Gaines. I have an issue that when she went on Bill Maher's podcast, she didn't know who Jimmy Carter was. That's my issue. But I can't unring that bell. That already happened. So,
the guy who's on the quarter.
oh my God. What denomination would a Jimmy Carter be on is the real question for everybody to answer. I will have one more question for you for us to get into. If anybody does want to ask a question, by all means, raise your hand to ask a question. My question for you is this, Ryan. I don't know about you. Do young people ever come to you and ask advice on getting into this industry? Would you tell them to enter sports media or would you beckon them to do anything else?
I tell them, look, I think we were fortunate to come of age in this blog era because I would not have come up through newspapers. I would not have been able to go cover high school sports and be in this hierarchy where you may never make it and you're just covering this stuff for maybe ever. Like the reasons, like, Bill Simmons has talked about how he couldn't like last at the Boston Herald would have applied to me, and I'm no Bill Simmons. Uh, I tell people like well with the blogs, like it was a way for us to get, really distributed in a way that doesn't exist today with how the platforms have changed. When I got to the big lead, all the important people were reading me. All the important people in sports media were reading me, and I was in my mid 20s. And
Mhm.
it didn't happen overnight, but in retrospect, it happened pretty quickly. And that type of opportunity doesn't exist for a mid 20s person today, although maybe they could become a TikTok star or a YouTube star and quickly gain a big audience if they're entertaining, but it wouldn't happen by writing. Uh,
Yeah. Ray Marcano says run screaming exclamation point. That seems to be the
no,
conventional
no,
wisdom.
no. Look, You can make it. What I tell everybody is you have to figure out something that is that the public is more interested in than gets covered. And for me, that was sports media because look at these people that we talk about, like Dave Portnoy, Big Cat, and stuff. These are more famous people than all but the most famous athletes. Like, yeah, LeBron, Patrick Mahomes, those people are more famous than Portnoy and Big Cat. But do you think that more people would recognize Jonathan Kaminga or Dave Portnoy on
Oh,
a random street?
Portnoy. People are going to be yelling anytime he
Or
does
like
one of these pizza
Josh Giddey
videos.
thinks he deserves $30 million. Way more people in Chicago would recognize Big Cat.
Yeah, I mean Portnoy. Whenever he does one of these pizza videos, people are yelling from their cars, "One bite, everyone knows the rules." He's got a lot of fame. He does, and I think that there is. I think the market inefficiency that we've waddled into is that similar to how the athletes don't want to talk about the errors of other athletes in the game the night before. I think there's some uncomfortability. Is that a word I'm looking for? A
Uh-huh.
hesitancy of media people honestly assessing other media people because they are our peers. And we hear back from them. We do.
Yes.
We try to
All the
be
time.
no mercy, no malice over here, but we hear back from people. And so I think that we've just decided that if we approach it in a way that's honest, that's not malicious, that it's worth it and it's okay. But I think that's one of the reasons why this lane has been opened up for us.
Right. But so what I tell people, and 5 years ago, I was saying cover women's sports. There's a lot of money coming in. There's going to be more coverage of them. If you want a job in sports media, like figure out the WNBA because there isn't a WNBA Woj. There isn't a WNBA Schefter. Annie Costabile, who works at Front Office Sports, is I think on the path to becoming that. She's breaking enormous stories in that space. But like right now, so I would say like at this point though, you're like that might already be too late. Although you could go be a beat reporter for the new Portland team or the new Philadelphia team that's coming and quickly develop a reputation in the space in your early 20s. I would say women's volleyball right now. Like if you could get into that and become like the person who knows everything about women's college volleyball, you could have a very long and successful career in this space. Now you got to be interested in it, but like if you figure out some type of niche that more public fans are interested in than there is media covering it, um you can be successful.
Woke Ryan getting us canceled from the right, lashing out at Riley Gaines, saying that people need to be hired to cover the WNBA. This is what's become. This is our vibe shift in reaction to the vibe shift. No, I agree with literally everything that you're saying. And I love the way that you're framing it about making it in this nearly impossible industry that, look, you see something undercovered, be that person, forge your own path. A lot of the time, somebody did something in this industry. It wasn't clear that there was anything that could be done in that direction. What Mark Halperin did with Two Way, I don't think anybody was saying what we really need is a YouTube show live where regular people can be brought on to discuss politics from both sides. That wasn't anything that people were demanding, and yet there's a demand for it. There's something there. You mentioned Gilbert Arenas. I remember he was writing for the Free Darko blog, and Free Darko, this is a long time ago. They had success talking about the NBA in this esoteric way with cool illustrations. And
Then they
I,
made Nike ads.
I just remember saying it was like they carved a niche into an invisible mountain.
Right.
And so if you see something that you think should be reflected more in the world and people are not doing it, there's often opportunity in that. There's opportunity there.
Think about just how many, like in women's college volleyball across all of the country, how many players there are on the teams, how many prospective players there are in high school, the coaches, the parents. If that is all your audience, that's still a lot of people. And if you become the person who knows the recruiting, the coaches, the analysis, who's the best. Like, you're going to make it. And there's no one else doing that right now.
Well, I did not expect us in this annual state of sports media to arrive at that particular instruction for everybody. But have we covered it all, Ryan? Is there anything else? Anything else about the state of things currently? I don't know if we're optimistic. I'm okay. I feel
Yeah.
like there's not a lot of money
Well,
in this business, but I'm
you
okay with its culture
we're
right now.
both in a space like I'm a lot happier than I was and a lot more optimistic I was a
Yeah.
year ago. I mean, my pay went up, and so now I feel good. But it's and yours too. I mean, yours not in the last year, but got a nice bump from the athletic to what you're doing now, and you're making more than you probably expected to a decade ago. And so, we're right now, I don't know if I'm affluent, but I'm in a space where I feel like a lot more optimistic because I reached like whatever the
Yeah.
next carrot was.
I think we're both more successful in this industry than we ever thought we would be. Then again, I didn't know the industry would just dissolve and collapse when I started out in it, but I guess it's worked out decently. And I have gratitude. I have a tremendous amount of gratitude to be able to do this. I think you forget that sometimes that not everybody in their jobs gets to share their ideas of what's going on in the world. And we should be thankful for our ability to do that.
And that's the other thing. I mean, like, should someone get into this? So yeah, I work at home. My commute is like picking up my laptop, and I like have some weird level of like influence in this world that I wasn't really expecting. And so if you compare it to any other job, like yeah, if you can make it doing this, and there, look, to say I never complain or whatever, that would be false. I do it all the time. But there's there's a lot to be said for not having to go into an office. Like in my case, I had a couple jobs where I had to work in an office, and I really didn't like it. I felt like I was in jail, and could not do manual labor. I could not work for any one of these
Yeah.
sports teams, probably. Like, even like in sports, like, could I sell sponsorships? Maybe. Would I enjoy it? Probably not. There are some people who live for that. That's the other thing. Like, if you want to get into sports business, if you can sell, then you can have any job in the world. If you can drive revenue, but that's not like getting into sports media necessarily, although you can. If you can sell, you could get into Barstool or Front Office Sports or The Athletic. Like, every company needs somebody who can drive money for them, because I'm not the one out there selling ads for Front Office Sports. Like, the people who are able to do that are worth their weight in gold.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different paths if you want to work in the sports business, that if you look at like, okay, how can I make a difference? You can do it.
I have no idea how that stuff works, Ryan. I have no idea how to sell things. I have a spectrumy ability to be honest about what's rattling around in my own head that I think is at cross purposes with sales. But hey, you got to work whatever angle that you have. You certainly have. It's been so great to see you succeed and flourish as the nation's number
Stop
one
it. Stop it.
sports media critic and reporter at Front Office Sports. Ryan, this has been glorious. I think we've answered every pertinent question about the state of the industry. Until next time, man.
Good job by
Appreciate it.
you.
Good job by you. Can end the stream now, I think, if I know how to do it.